Okay, so I changed the plan already. I was going to do roughly 8 minutes of new content in each video, followed by 8 minutes of comments discussion. Then I wrote my script and it was already over 20 minutes, and that was cutting out half of the comments I wanted to talk about. So the idea is instead to separate them so each portion can go a little longer, and hopefully this will also allow me to take this channel weekly, or maybe 2 out of 3. So in this video, I'll be discussing some of the comments left under the Quillian Biology Part 2 video, evaluating your ideas, and deciding whether or not to incorporate them into Quillian Biology. Let's get into it. There were a few comments linking the idea of wings moving of their own volition with something like human spinal reflexes or the way octopus tentacles are each like an additional brain. Now, I had heard of both of those before, but I never thought about them in connection to the wings, and it makes a ton of sense. I like the magical element, and that can still be part of it, literally, but also in the Quillian's own perception of the phenomenon. But I also love the idea of a more grounded scientific reasoning behind it. But my question would be, is the secondary brain just a clump of nerves like the human spine, or more like actual brain matter? If it was like a true secondary brain, it's possible that the two sides could be split between each wing and protected by the enlarged shoulder blade. I haven't gotten to drawing out that part of the anatomy yet, but I can see something like that working. I think that idea is really cool and unique, with the shoulder blades acting almost like skulls. But also, if there is clearly identifiable brain matter, that might take away from the magical perception. So a clump of nerves might work better. We had a bit of a discussion over on the Discord about waterproofing wings. The wing oil we talked about in the previous video serves the function of waterproofing your wings. However, birds in real life have different levels of waterproofing depending on their environment. I think with my avians, this would be part of the power hierarchy I've mentioned before, with the high-powered avians tending to have the best waterproofing and the low-powered avians having the worst. The hierarchy covers a number of factors, including size, strength, and bird adaptation such as waterproofing, but it wouldn't be a perfectly even distribution, just a general trend. For example, I have an avian group based on cormorants and anhingas, which are diving birds. These avians do not produce feather oil and instead allow their wings to soak up water and help propel them while swimming. They are not at the bottom of the overall power hierarchy, but their waterproofing definitely is. I get recurrent comments about the possibility of feather dyeing. I have very mixed feelings about this. To me, it sounds like hair dye, which just seems like a really modern thing to worry about, even though I know that's not technically true. Henna has been used as hair dye since ancient Egypt, but I'll probably keep getting the suggestion until I talk about it, so... For one, there wouldn't be many dyes available on the plains. Maybe they can use certain flowers, roots, and berries to make a few different bright dyes, primarily used for dyeing beads. These could, in theory, be applied to feathers, though I can't see the effect being more than temporary. However, the question is, would they? And that's what I'm not sure of. Would their culture consider a pop of color beautiful, or would they prefer a clean, glossy, natural look? For one, it might greatly depend on type. Black and scarlet Qyaalyon don't have much of a canvas, but silvers and goldens could do a lot more. Gray and brown males have a nice white patch under their wings, though females have a speckled pattern there. I doubt anyone would do it regularly. It just seems like too much of a vanity, and though they can be vain, they're not a moneyed society, so there isn't an upper class with time to waste purely on high-maintenance aesthetics. Also, I can see it being very bad for hunting, too disruptive of their natural camouflage. I can see silver or golden Quillian using dyes sometimes to actually improve their camouflage, blending in with their current terrain, which could give them a bit of an advantage over the other more limited colors. It gives me a cool idea. If maybe a silver was some kind of spy or ninja, they could paint their wings with modeled mixed camouflage colors. But again, it's a lot of maintenance, so I can't see the average person doing it regularly. However, festivals are an entirely different matter, and we've already discussed that the males especially go all out. So I can definitely see a group of teenagers going out and gathering berries before the festival and painting themselves with colorful dyes. But since the white underwing has a more intimate significance, I can also see the flashing of their wings to show off the dyed undersides being considered pretty suggestive. However, it might come down to subculture. The Quillian were originally going to be one homogeneous group, but there are just too many good ideas that I can see working for some but not others. For now, let's say that even though the population has become very mixed, feather dyeing is basically non-existent in traditionally black and scarlet territories. The silvers and goldens do practice it, both males and females, and it's become just a traditional part of their festivals. The gray and brown territories don't practice it much, but there's a bit of bleed over from the goldens and silvers, and those who do it are still seen as a bit scandalous. Okay, when I say that I get genuinely awesome ideas from the audience, this is exactly what I mean. I passed this comment up at first thinking that they meant some highly advanced surgical procedures, but when I looked it up, it's not. It's as simple as cutting 2 feathers to fit, placing a small rod through the quills, and then gluing the quills together. Holy crap, this changes so many things, and it actually helps me solve a big plot issue. Okay, first, logistics. This is easiest to do with large primary feathers and would become harder with smaller feathers and impossible with the smallest. Practically speaking, a broken primary would be the most important to repair for flight, and replacing others would only need to be done if the person damaged a bunch all at once. It might get experimental though. What if a Quillian used transplants to extend the length of their primaries and give themselves a flight power boost? I can see the Quillian using small rods of bone for stabilizer, and glue can be made from a lot of natural ingredients. However, there would also be a limit since bone can only be cut so small before it becomes too weak. But other avians with more technological advancement could use steel needles and replace much smaller feathers. This feather transplanting would develop for the more obvious functional reasons, but it would definitely make its way into the aesthetic realm. I can see several reasons to replace a feather. It might be a funeral tradition, replacing one of your primary feathers with your departed loved ones. Lovers might swap a feather from the underside of their wings. It might also be done for pure aesthetics, replacing a feather or two with more permanently dyed or otherwise decorated feathers. As far as larger replacements go, like replacing all of your feathers, for 1, small feathers would be too small. For 2, it would be extremely costly and time-consuming. 3, replaced feathers would be a little bit weaker than an original feather. And 4, feathers molt, so it's not like it'd even be permanent. So completely swapping your feathers would be impossible and absolutely impractical to even try. But swapping only a few at a time would be manageable for even the least technologically advanced avians. So many ideas. Oh man. The chimera genetic condition could create a child with 2 different colored wings. Okay, you're right, a split-wing chimera is technically feasible. I just don't really care about 1 in a million possibilities unless it's relevant to the story of a particular character. If I was writing a story about a chimera that was the original person the myth was based on, or seen as that figure reborn, or abandoned and raised by outsiders, or something like that, then I'd care. I like to focus on the big picture, the broad society with world building, and the unique, norm-breaking individuals only within the context of the story. This comment is talking about how birds' eyes perceive more colors and shades and UV lights than human eyes. Basically, they are better in every way. I really like this, but I don't think I can implement it because I have no idea how I write it. The only way I can see it working is if another type of avian had more bird-like eyes, maybe the falcon or eagle people. Then, if I was writing from a Quillian's perspective, it would be just as foreign of a concept for them to try and understand. I mean, could be fun. Birds having lighter bones appears to be a myth. The air pockets in their bones are used like extra air sacs to store more oxygen for flight. I know, I found that out right after I finished uploading the last video, and I was like, well. But yeah, that's cool. Birds have a 3rd eyelid to protect their eyes. Good to know. I'll hold that one on reserve. Maybe the Quillian will have it, maybe not. This is a bit of a spoiler, but the reason I'm so adamant about keeping the Quillian in particular close to human is because it's already part of the story. There's a wingless Quillian who at one point goes undercover with humans. So Quillian need to be close enough that they could pass as a human absent their wings. And I'm not sure if 3rd eyelids would impact that. The air sacs make birds way more sensitive to inhaled toxins. And that's where we get the bit of history about the canary in the coal mine. Yes, good point, that would be a particular weakness of all avians, but especially on that power chart, the more powerful aliens would probably also be the most susceptible. And if you had a multi-species adventuring group and they hit something poisonous, the poor avians would be the first to go down. I think the whole Musk thing is a really good idea, but birds generally communicate vocally and visually. Yeah, I don't know. They don't have to be like birds in every way because they are a mixture of genes, like nauticans, who are somehow mammalian, fish, and amphibians. And I've already written the Musk into the story. It's not a huge plot point, but it adds a lot of character. For now, I'm going to leave it, but I do have another race that has more feline and canine qualities, who I can see the Musk working really well for. So the only reason I would take the Musk away from avians is if I reassign it to the Trainox. I had a shocking number of people suggest feathers growing down the sides of their legs in replacement of a tail. Shocking because so many people reached the exact same conclusion that had never remotely crossed my mind, and I own chickens with leg feathers. Okay, for the Quillian, I think probably no. I might change my mind later, but I do like them the way they are, and then there is that blending as human thing. However, they are low-tier migrators, so maybe the higher-tier flyers have leg feathers or tails. Related, I did have a few comments discussing the body positioning during flight and referencing gliding suits. See, I don't think having bipedal-shaped bodies and legs would be necessarily detrimental to their flight, but it would definitely change things. You might scrunch up and kick your legs out, or raise them, or angle them to change your positioning. I think their flight would develop all sorts of unique techniques and be very different from a bird's. And speaking of flight positioning, there were several comments still disagreeing with the use of bows and arrows. And here's the thing, I hear you, I'm not convinced. No, you couldn't fly and shoot a long bow, but you definitely could fly and shoot a short bow. I ran into a guy I know doing reenactments and asked him a bit about bows. He told me that while the current standard is a minimum 40-pound draw weight for hunting, at least in Illinois, Native Americans usually hunted a lot closer in range and could get away with a much lighter draw weight. He also told me that the shortest bow he's ever made was about 24 inches. It was very lightweight and had very small arrows, but it worked. He said there are also things you can do to strengthen a short bow and give it a greater draw weight, such as reinforcing the face with something elastic, such as sinew, leather, or, like his bow, snakeskin. With a shorter bow, you have a shorter draw time and a lot more flexibility in how you hold it and position yourself. You don't have to have the same posture as a long bow. And also think, if you're flying, your position will already be different. You could dive down and essentially aim over your head, or you could swoop sideways long enough to take a more traditional position. Or there might be a movement raising one wing slightly aside long enough to take the shot as you're in the middle of a roll. I was even more convinced after I found this video by Lars Anderson, where he reconstructed Comanche shooting styles. I'll link the video below, but the way he held his bow was completely different, and I definitely think it could work in flight. With that, let's get into weapons. Okay, fine, you've convinced me. Atlatls are probably not a good idea from the air. Lots of weapons ideas were thrown out: boomerangs, bolas, slingshots, throwing darts, crossbows, flechettes, and rocks. And yes, I did go watch the Shadiversity video. One thing to remember is that there are lots of different avian groups, so maybe different types favor different weapons, such as boomerangs, bolas, slings, or throwing darts. With rocks, I can't see Quillian doing that at all. I think that they would be very miffed at the inelegance of hunting with rocks. But the other problem with rocks and flechettes is the inaccuracy. Flechettes were developed for war, and they were dropped in bulk over the enemy lines. So they might be devastating in battle, but I'm having a hard time seeing them effective when hunting a single target. They might be useful in hunting if you had a whole herd of antelope, but the Qyaalyon try to be very intentional about which animals they target, going for weak or old antelope or bucks if they need to, but they try to avoid killing does and young antelope. So I feel like using such an imprecise weapon would be highly frowned upon. With crossbows, they also don't seem like something Quillian would use. They're too bulky, too heavy, and they take too long to reload, especially compared with Comanche-style archery. They might use spears or throwing darts or something like that if they dove low and skimmed the land, but bows would probably still be more efficient. So in conclusion, I don't know. I still think short bows and arrows would be the best. As for that traditional hunter and modern hunter dichotomy I talked about last time, I don't know. I don't think atlatls are right, maybe flechettes, but then I think that it would be a very uneven dichotomy, with one side clearly in the wrong, using a war weapon for wanton slaughter instead of bow hunting precision. So if I don't think of just the right weapon, I might drop it or reduce it to an outlier issue instead of a widespread societal divide. This long one is pointing out a lot more of the biological issues. I really appreciate the time and thought you put into all of that, but the truth is, all flying humans are impossible. If I strive too hard for realism, they'll become more and more bird-like until they eventually just become giant birds with human intelligence. And that's fine, but it's not the kind of story I'm writing. There's a reason why winged humans are such a popular concept. People want to believe in it. They want to imagine themselves flying. An audience tends not to pick apart things that they want to be real. So the creator does need to bring a level of realism, but more than that, they need to create a world worth believing in. One people love so much, they're willing to hand-wave the remaining unrealistic parts. Okay, to this a-hole leaving a whole string of rude comments because of their internet anonymity entitlement mentality, this is obviously a work in progress, hampered by my art skills. I'm good at Illustrator, but with human bodies, I'm basically limited to tracing, which makes it very difficult to illustrate exactly what I'm picturing. I haven't talked about muscles yet because I haven't illustrated them. I haven't even illustrated the back of the skeleton with the wing joints, which I'll definitely need to do first. The biology isn't nearly finished, and we'll get back to it later after I develop more of their culture, because I don't want to wheel spin and get hung up on just biology. If wings are extremely important and where the soul resides, a potentially scary monster would be a wing stealer. Yes, I think some kind of wing stealer monster would definitely be part of their mythology. I have no ideas for that story yet, but I want to start writing myths down, like the split-colored betrayer and the cloud antelope and Shakoba's gift of lions. The relationship you described between Quillian and their wings got me thinking. Maybe having your wings amputated would be like losing your daemon in His Dark Materials. I haven't read those books, but I have watched the Dominic Noble breakdown, and I think it would be similar, though maybe not quite as extreme if I end up going with a second brain instead of a magical soul. Common question, lay eggs or live birth? They have live births. Just too much biology would need to change for egg laying. Though connected to this, if you for your world want a society with complete sexual equality, avians who lay eggs and hatch babies that don't need breast milk would be very helpful because parents could split incubation and feeding duties. They could have subtle differences like in quail. Some may be brighter or darker than another. Yes, there would definitely be subtle differences, not only in color, but in the patterning of their feathers. Each individual organism is always unique. But for video making purposes and illustrating them, I'm keeping it simple and not worrying about subtle differences. I really want to know what birdsong sounds like. If you think about it, it's really a blend of human and avian vocal anatomy. So they can make bird calls but articulate them with their mouths. So would these songs have actual spoken lyrics, or would it just be like melodic bird calls that suggest lyrics? I love this, but I have no idea. If they're telling stories in poetry, I think there ought to be lyrics, not just pretty noises. But I'm not musical or linguistic enough to come up with more than a vague idea. This culture reminds me of the American Indians. Was this on purpose? This one is hard to answer because I'm not sure to what extent they're inspired by or just similar, because both cultures are hunters and nomads on a similar landscape. Quillian definitely aren't supposed to be based on Native Americans in an allegorical sense, but Native Americans have some of the ancient cultures I've been most interested in and learned the most about. Because of this, they will obviously have an influence, so I decided not to shy away from it, but I hate allegory because I don't want my stories to be read as reflective of or social commentary on Native American history or struggles. And there are some aspects of Quillian that are directly opposite Native American history, so I don't know. World building is tricky. Alright, that's where we'll leave off for this video. Next week's video will be Sociology Part 1, where we'll go deeper into Quillian flocks, life cycles, and social structure. Comments left under this video will probably be saved for whenever I get around to Biology Part 3. So, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to see more of my work, you can subscribe to me here on YouTube and follow my Instagram. There is a Discord server, but I'm limiting access to control the growth, so check the description box. And I also have my main YouTube channel for sewing and another Instagram for that. See ya!